Hey everyone, what's going on? So, been talking about this topic on and off recently. You may have seen a couple of shorts over the past few weeks, and I decided I wanted to put together a full video in an attempt to consolidate all of my thoughts on, well, on the MMO genre. It's in pretty dire straits. Yeah, I mean, this is no surprise. This isn't new to anyone who's a fan of these games. Things are not looking great in the world of new MMO development. It's, of course, an entirely different story for the established games out there. Yes, of course, World of Warcraft, FF14, ESO, Albion, Guild Wars 2, and the like. Many of these games are trucking along relatively nicely, most of which getting new updates and new content every single year. But when it comes to new games in the genre, for the most part, it's been a crapshoot for well over a decade. Now, the reasons for this are, of course, numerous, and so are the videos out there talking about this very thing. But today, I'd like to kind of narrow in on what seems to be one of the current biggest impediments to new MMOs being created and actually making it through development and eventually getting released. Like, what's the holdup and what, if anything, could be the solution? And then finally, I like to go over some of my expectations for the future, the next, say, 5 or 10 years, and any hope that we might have for the genre making a comeback. A big shout out goes out to Lazy Peon. He made a video covering many of these things a few weeks back. I definitely suggest giving that a look. This is actually what inspired my recent discussions and thinking about this very topic, which I've spent a lot of time doing recently, all while keeping track of my time with the help of today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by one of my long-term favorites, that is Holtzkern. These are genuinely great watches. I've been wearing them for years now, and I honest to goodness just really like them. In fact, you will see me wearing one in practically every single video, sponsored or not. Now, if you've not seen or heard of these before, Holtzkern's whole thing is that they make unique watches using a variety of materials. This will include various gemstones, woods, pearls, and rocks, any combination of which will be part of the watch's band, dial, face, and or strap. I've got several of their watches that I really like. In particular, I like a lot of the ones with this wood built into the design, whether it's on the face or the band or the strap or whatever. Their products are manufactured in small quantities to help ensure responsible production, and as mentioned, they're all crafted from these natural materials, in turn making each watch quite unique and also of high quality. Every product also comes with a 2-year guarantee, and they offer free express worldwide shipping, covering custom fees, with purchases typically arriving in 2 to 5 business days. If you're interested, now's as good a time as ever to check out one for yourself, whether you want one for yourself or as a gift for someone over the holidays. They do make a great one of those. Either way, be sure to use our link below, and if you use the code FORCE at checkout, you're going to get 15% off any purchase. Okay, so before we can talk about potential solutions, let's start off with identifying the problem. There is, of course, a long list of reasons as to why it's difficult to make a new MMO. First off, there's the amount of time and resources it takes, both of which require quite a lot. Then there's the fact that you're competing with games that have, in some cases, 20 years of updates, and trying to make that content right out the gate is actually impossible. And then those games also have player bases that are entrenched and may very well be reluctant to move on to something new. Although I will say that I think New World's near 1 million concurrent players at release proved that there is a big appetite out there. There are a lot of players who are looking for something new in the genre, but I digress. Which then also does bring us to our next problem, and that's the fact that if your game actually finishes development and gets released, and you have initial success, you are then met with a daunting task of maintaining that player base and producing new content for months and or years following your launch. And then also there's just, all the other forms of media and entertainment out there that games compete with, as we are, after all, in an attention economy. All of these things come together and just make it very difficult to just even to get these games greenlit and developed. But beyond all of those things, there is one other major factor that we were dealing with, which has become even more abundantly clear in the year 2025. And that is the fact that there is zero investor confidence in the MMO genre, especially here in the West. We are getting games canceled left and right because the people who fund these projects don't believe in them and or they don't think that they're worth the money. Meanwhile, Eastern studios have been cranking out new MMOs every year. Just in the past few years, we saw the releases of Aeon 2, Sword of Justice, Blue Protocol, Throne and Liberty, Lost Ark, Taurusland, Elion, Bless Online, Bless Unleashed, Bless Unchained, Bless whatever other iterations they did. I mean, Eastern development studios are simply pumping out games in this genre, while we are over here in the West, our studios are like on life support and getting the boot, really. And there's a few reasons for the discrepancy here, one of which Peon specifically pointed out in his video that really kind of sent the light bulb off in my head. One big factor is just that the cost of labor is way cheaper, or in other words, they can develop a similar product for much lower investment. If you take a look at the average yearly salary for a game developer in the US, we're looking at approximately 116,000 USD. The average salary for a game dev in, say, South Korea is around 76 million Korean won. 76 million sounds like a lot, but that comes out to, when you convert, approximately 51,000 USD. So for each individual developer, it costs investors less than half the amount of money per year of development. And for a genre where games tend to take in the ballpark of 5, 7, upwards of 10 years to make, that adds up quickly. The salaries paid to developers and any of the other employees associated with making games, that accounts for the bulk of the cost that it takes to make said games. On top of that, you've also got the fact that Eastern MMOs tend to monetize more heavily than their Western counterparts, and in turn also have player bases who are just more used to everything this entails. You know, with the list here, we're talking about cash shops and then Gamba via gacha pulls. We're talking about paying for cosmetics pretty much being a given, paying for convenience being very likely, and paying for power occurring in a decent percent of these games as well. And then also on top of that, many Eastern MMOs end up getting mobile ports to boot, which effectively doubles their potential market. Speaking of which, remember that Horizon MMO that we were anticipating from Sony in collaboration with NCSoft? Well, that got revealed not too long ago, and it's just a straight up phone game. In fact, it's not even coming to PlayStation. You can bet that it is really, really a phone game if Sony is paying to develop this Horizon MMO and not even launching it on their very own consoles. It's just a straight up phone game. They're getting a mobile port version to PC, but don't hold your breath on that. That's all I gotta say. So just to recap here, Eastern developed MMOs often cost half as much per developer to make, they monetize much more heavily, and often double their potential audience thanks to the frequency of these games getting mobile versions. So if you're an investor and you're interested in games and you have $100 million, are you spending it on the studio making an MMO in the US, or are you spending it on the studio making an MMO in South Korea? That's a trick question because we already know the answer. We are living the answer. Multiple new Eastern MMOs come out every single year. Meanwhile, here in the West, we might release one new MMO every 5 years, and then we're canceling the rest of them, as covered in a recent video. Just in the past year alone, actually in the past 6 months, 4 in development MMOs from Western studios got the axe. There was that Warhammer MMO, Ghost Crawlers MMO, the Lord of the Rings MMO, and Project Blackbird. In every instance, this was a matter of the people funding the project not wanting to invest any more money. Both the Warhammer MMO and Project Ghost actually got canceled after NetEase pulled funding. The irony isn't lost on me that it was NetEase that ended up canceling both these games, by the way. Amazon announced that they were stepping away from the entire genre following their attempt with New World, and in the process canceled the Lord of the Rings MMO they had going on. And then Project Blackbird, similarly, that got binned when Microsoft, in their own cost-cutting measures, fired thousands of employees. It was also said that for Blackbird in particular, the decision was motivated to divert funding towards a new Fallout project. This information actually came from Jez Corden back in July, where he said that the cancellation came down to Microsoft deciding they didn't want to continue spending money on a game that may or may not compete with the likes of World of Warcraft, ultimately figuring the money was better off invested in an established franchise. To quote him directly, "From what I heard, it was a case of trade-offs and that the program to expand Fallout 5 and just Fallout in general, that's where they decided to make the investments and where the money will be translated into more of a surefire win." Another example of the people with the money saying, I don't want to spend my millions making this risky MMO thing, let's do another Fallout game instead. Okay, so those are some of the big current problems on top of the long list of problems that MMOs have, not only with getting made, but in maintaining life post-release. And really, I wanted this video to talk about, like, why are we getting so many Western MMOs canceled? And again, that's what I think a lot of it comes down to, just the lack of investor confidence in these projects, the amount of risk involved, and the sheer quantity of money and the length of time it takes to make these games. Now let's talk about potential solutions. For starters, yes, of course, Investor confidence needs to return. If no one out there thinks that it is worth the cost or risk associated with making an MMO at a Western studio, we're just not going to get any more of them beyond the crowd-funded ones or the enthusiast investors, the likes of things like Ashes of Creation, where you got someone who's really into the genre, has a bunch of money, and uses that to seed the beginning of this project. And, we'll wait to see how that turns out, but we won't get into that in this video. So investors need to think that MMOs are worth it again, and for that to happen, we likely just need another breakthrough hit. And that could come from a few potential sources. There are a few other Western MMOs that are still currently in development. Fingers crossed they don't get canceled as of the posting of this video or something. We know, of course, that Riot is working on their MMO, the League of Legends MMO based in the Runeterra universe. Guild Wars 3 is reportedly in development, although that's never been officially publicly revealed. It was just kind of mentioned during a quarterly earnings call, but it seems like that is happening. There's a new EverQuest game coming from Daybreak. And then also I want to give a shout out to Project Fantasy from IO Interactive. We're still unsure of exactly what this entails, but from their brief description on the little reveal page, it seems like it may have some kind of shared world elements, which I'm really interested in. So yeah, if any of these projects release, or ones that are not mentioned here, if any MMO-like game comes out and is a massive success, once again, a brand new one just pops off, that is almost going to guarantee that we get investors willing to spend money on anything that looks to mimic that success. I think another potential option is just the idea of making MMOs less risky by making them cost less money. I mentioned AI recently in a short that I did, and I just want to say I didn't mention it because I'm a massive proponent or anything. It's really just simply the fact that the use of AI assisting smaller teams in developing these games could help lower cost, and that lower cost translates to less risk, and that makes it more likely that these things ever get off the ground in the first place. Given the utter lack of confidence investors have in the genre right now in the West, anything that helps reduce costs could in fact result in more MMOs actually being made, funded in the first place, and not getting canceled prior to release. And once more, I just want to reiterate the fact that we touched on just in the past 6 months, we lost a Warhammer MMO, a Lord of the Rings MMO, Project Ghost, and then ZeniMax Online Studios' Project Blackbird. Every one of those got canceled for financial reasons. So cutting the cost, making it less risky, I think is a key factor in the equation of us even getting new games developed in this genre. I mean, the fact that in every one of these cases, these people were willing to throw away most likely hundreds of millions of dollars in the already invested in development of each of these games. They were willing to throw it away because they didn't think it was worth any more future investment. That speaks for itself. I think these costs really need to get cut. MMOs need to be developed on a smaller budget. Maybe AI helps with that. Maybe other things and tech in the future help with that. I don't exactly know, but something needs to reduce these costs if we're going to get any more made. Now, as for the future of the genre, beyond any of the mentioned MMOs that I just listed, coming out being a massive success and that driving investor confidence, which results in more future projects getting funded, I really think that the most likely path forward for the genre is probably just going to be in a new direction. And hopefully that new direction, once more, costs less money. Namely, I think there's a really high probability that the big MMO of the future will look absolutely nothing like the big MMOs of the past. I think there's a good chance it probably won't be tab target, and I am a proponent of that combat system. I actually really enjoy, and I see the virtues in tab targeting. Both action and tab target have their place, but I don't suspect that there's an appetite for new tab target games on a mass scale. You never know though, anything could happen, sort of like how Baldur's Gate 3 saw a resurgence of the turn-based CRPGs. Maybe something like that similarly could happen with tab target combat in the future. I'm definitely not going to rule it out, but if I had to guess, I'm going to say the next big MMO that pops off and makes it into the mainstream and gets a lot of players and then drives investor confidence and reinvest in the MMO genre, I'm guessing it's not going to look like WoW. That's all I'm saying. I'm also guessing it might not be the traditional theme park, and I'm not saying it has to be full-on sandbox, but less of a hand-holdy quest hub to quest hub kind of thing, and more of like an exploratory nature. Not exactly sure how that'll play out, but just spitballing here. And then also, I think that there's probably a high probability that it isn't full-on sharded open worlds or sharded servers and full open worlds where all 10,000, 20,000 people on a server you can see simultaneously standing on the same rock in the middle of a city. I'm guessing it's more likely to be something along the shared world stuff. I mean, I sort of envision a combination of, say, the kind of combat system that mixes fantasy elements with traditional sword and board and archery and the different class archetypes and magic. Something like the sort of combat you see in Dragon's Dogma 2, and then combining that with some more traditional MMO progression, a shared open world, group dungeons, maybe some sort of raids, PvP stuff, towns with player housing, life skilling. I mean, again, I would love a Dragon's Dogma 2 MMO, or I take a look in the shooter space, and I would love a game like Arc Raiders, but more leaning into the PvE in a big shared open world rather than just having these instance maps that you drop into. There's a lot of potential for hybrids and variations on the genre in the future that once more don't look exactly like the big MMOs of today, and I do think there's a good chance that that's what we're going to look towards in the future. Imagine a game that plays like Elden Ring and a world like Elden Ring, but it's also an MMO. There's all sorts of things. And there's really, I guess, unlimited potential for what we could get in the future, and we can't really guess exactly what it's going to be, but I'm just kind of throwing darts at the board here. Maybe something sticks. So yeah, in conclusion, there's a lot of things that go into why MMOs fail when they come out, and the things that go wrong in development, and the things that they do or don't do that result in the subsequent outcome. But I definitely think right now we are at a point where, and once more, we have to make a difference. There's a clear difference between the Western development studios and the Eastern development studios, and the frequency and quantity of MMOs that are coming out. Here in the West, it just costs way too much. Investors don't have the confidence. They don't think it's worth the money. They're not investing in new projects. They're canceling existing projects. Something about that has to change. And I think part of that reduction in risk and the reduction in cost it takes to make these games, and ideally the length of time it takes to make these games, might be a change to how that they are made, whether that's with the assistance of AI or whether it's just a different kind of game presented in a different way that doesn't take 10 years to reach an alpha state and 20% of the game complete. There's no shots, sorry. Ashes, no shots at Dead Ashes of Creation. That's just what's top of mind right now. But yeah, things are definitely gonna have to change. It's a really interesting problem. I will say too, in recent years, with the lack of new MMOs releasing that we've seen, I've started to shift into other genres of games to get kind of my MMO fix. And yeah, I'm looking at the shared world, smaller scale, less players per server or whatever, but still getting that multiplayer experience with exploration and discovery. And survival games have done a lot of that for me as well. I think Enshrouded is a fantastic example of an Enshrouded game that kind of gives you that sense of adventure and exploration and discovery of a world, but it still doesn't quite exactly scratch the MMO itch because you're on a server, you're inviting people to join you, so it's not quite the same. It doesn't have quite the same social dynamics. We will see. The future is, of course, to be determined. I cannot predict it, otherwise I would be a bajillionaire. But I'm hopeful, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how it all plays out, and hopefully we get some new good MMOs in the coming years. Not looking great like the next 5 years, but maybe 10 years from now. Check back in. I'll probably still be here on YouTube. All right, guys, that's all for me today. Thank you for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about this topic below. I'm sure this is going to be quite a conversation. I'll talk to you guys later. See ya.